Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Grajdek. I'm Dr. Martha Grajdek. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. When it comes to making decisions, most of us, if not all of us, make hundreds, maybe even thousands of decisions every single day. And many people make a great deal of decisions while at work as well. But the reality is that too much decision making can be exhausting. Let's talk about decision fatigue while at work. You may be wondering, since we are all already making lots and lots of decisions throughout the day, what's the big deal about decision making at work? Well, there is a component to consider here when it comes to decision making at work, because making decisions at work could have an effect on each individual. It could affect their behaviors, it could affect their performance. Therefore, it's important for us to recognize decision fatigue at the workplace. There's much to be said for autonomy, an individual's ability to make decisions that pertain to their own work environment and to their work in particular. But there is something else to consider when we think about fatigue and decision making at the workplace. And while some people and some jobs will require you to make more decisions than others, the bottom line is this: the more decisions that a person has to make throughout their work day, the more tiring that can be. Something else that's important to consider is that the more difficult the decisions that you have to make at work, the more impact decision-making can potentially have on you. So if you are faced with decisions all day long or for the vast majority of your time at work, you can experience decision fatigue much more quickly, much more likely, and much more severely than someone who does not have as many and as difficult decisions to make throughout the day. Besides the sheer volume, the number of decisions that one would have to make at work, and the difficulty of those decisions, there are other things to consider. Let's think about people whose decisions affect or impact other people. So whether that's someone in leadership or management position, or whether that's someone like a judge, for example, or a doctor, especially an emergency room doctor as an example. When your decision making affects other people, that can have a greater toll, that can take a greater toll on you as an individual. And that's regardless of whether that decision is immediate in its consequences or something that may affect people down the road into the future. Either way, having a great deal of responsibility with that kind of decision making can be very taxing on an individual. Decision making can also be difficult when you are lacking information or when you're facing uncertainty. For example, if you simply don't have the data, the information that is required for you to feel comfortable in making your decision, or if circumstances are such that you simply cannot know how things will play out, what will happen in the immediate future, and how your decision will impact what happens. That in itself can also be quite challenging when faced with decision making at work. For those of you who tend to be perfectionists by nature, you already know that decision making can be your Achilles heel. You may find yourself stuck in trying to make a decision when you're attempting to account for every possible variable, for every possible outcome, and are aiming for a perfect decision. That whole process can be very stressful. Decision making at work can be that much more stressful and that much more taxing on you when you're already dealing with a situation outside of the workplace. Maybe it's something related to your personal life. Maybe it's something that's going on in the world around you, in your community, in your society. When you are already stressed out or weighed down by other events or other circumstances, decision making at work can be that much more fatiguing. It's important to remember that decision fatigue can impact employees at management and non-management positions alike. It can be equally as stressful and taxing. Decision fatigue can lead to behavioral changes, performance issues, and health problems. That includes physical, emotional, and psychological health. There are certain symptoms that are important for us to notice when we think about fatigue in terms of decision making at work. And this is just as important for those in management and leadership positions. Things to look for in your team, things to look for in yourself, as it is important for those in non-management or non-leadership positions. You really should be aware of what is going on with you so that you can recognize if you are approaching decision fatigue in your own experience. What kind of things should we be on the lookout for when it comes to decision-making fatigue? First and foremost, pay attention to the levels of stress and anxiety. Things such as inability to focus or concentrate, decreased performance, decreased motivation, those can all be related to decision fatigue. Poor judgment, procrastination, feeling overwhelmed, avoidance, those can all be related to decision fatigue as well. Mood changes and irritability can also be linked to decision fatigue, so pay attention to those symptoms. Now that we have some idea of what decision fatigue is, how it can look, what kind of symptoms can be related to it, it's important to think about how we can reduce or even prevent decision fatigue at work. One way to reduce decision fatigue at work is to learn how to prioritize effectively. That means that not everything should be top priority or number one priority. This truly is a skill that one can be learned and certainly can be mastered, and one that everyone should have. Not all decisions have to be made all at once. So knowing how to properly and effectively prioritize can be tremendously helpful in reducing decision fatigue. Streamlining processes and improving workflow can also be tremendously helpful to combating decision fatigue at work. Something else that some of you may have heard about and some of you may find surprising is the idea of removing choice. When you have fewer decisions to make, you are more likely to help yourself with decision fatigue. So simply removing the need to make certain decisions can help you. You may have heard, for example, that some people report wearing the same type of outfit every single day to work, for example. That eliminates them having to decide every day what to wear, having to put an outfit together, having to take that time and devote the energy to making another decision in their day. Pre-planning can also be helpful. And while you may not be completely removing decisions, because pre-planning will take care of some of the decisions ahead of time, pre-planning, whether it's things such as your schedule, your outfits, your meals, can help you to not be taxed with certain decisions for the next however many days your pre-planning is designed for. Being able to delegate can be a lifesaver when it comes to making decisions and the related decision fatigue. So remember to delegate whenever possible. Things such as self-care are critical. When you are dealing with a stressful work experience, if you have a lot of decisions to make throughout the day, taking care of yourself is priority one. Only by being strong, healthy, and resilient can you face the day's challenges on a regular basis. Making sure to take breaks for things such as exercise can be an excellent way of dealing with decision fatigue. Exercise is an important part of self-care. It's great for your physical health as well as your psychological and emotional health, and is a fantastic way to build resilience. All things that are important for reducing and eliminating decision fatigue. As this episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. Decision making at work is something that nearly everyone experiences. While some jobs and some days require more decision making than others, having to make many decisions throughout the day at work can be quite taxing on the mind and the body. Things such as volume, in terms of how many decisions one has to make throughout the day, the difficulty of the decisions, things such as whether or not the decisions that you make affect other people and how severely they affect other people. Things that are happening outside of work, both in your personal life and in the world around you. And even having perfectionist tendencies can all affect how one reacts to decision making at work. Having to make a lot of difficult decisions at work can be taxing physically, psychologically, and emotionally. It can affect not only our health and well-being, but also things such as behaviors, productivity, and motivation. And it's important to remember that decision-making at work affects both those in leadership or management positions and those who are not in leadership or management positions. Being aware of changes and effects of decision fatigue are critical for addressing the issue properly. And while things such as prioritizing properly and streamlining processes can be very helpful to reducing decision fatigue, we must remember to engage in proper self-care, delegate whenever possible, and remove choice to automatically decrease the number of decisions that we have to make every day. As the week unfolds, I invite you to consider your decision-making experience, especially when it comes to the workplace. Consider how many decisions do you have to make during your workday, and what is the difficulty or impact of your decision-making? Have you noticed changes in yourself? Have you noticed decision-making as affecting you? If you're in a management or leadership position, your responsibility is even greater, because not only do you have to pay attention to yourself and your own decision-making experiences, but you also should be on the lookout for decision fatigue within your team members. As you learned in today's episode, there are things that everyone can do to reduce decision fatigue. Why not take this opportunity to get started? For those of you who experience this podcast in an audio-only version, I invite you to check out my YouTube channel, Stress Free with Dr. G, where you can find the video version of the podcast. While you're there, check out some of the other videos which focus on stress management. Stress Free with Dr. G can be found on YouTube, and the link for that is in the description below. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I look forward to seeing you here again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.